hold up. There's something you need to know before you start skipping around the video and then getting mad because you skip past the context. When ranking the items, we're not just going to be taking how good they are as the only variable. Otherwise, the ranking would be little more than just putting all the last place items at the top and the first place items at the bottom. After all, I think Nintendo already does a fine enough job determining what items are better than others, which is why you can't roll a lightning in first place. For these rankings, we also need to take into consideration the probability of rolling said item, and more importantly, what rankings you can roll said item. Okay, we good? Y'all ain't sneaky. I've seen the analytics. I know you f***ers just skip to the end of the list and then get mad at what you see like I put up an IGN review. I'm f***ing pissed because video games, and that's why I made a YouTube channel. Alright, just like my last Mario Kart video, we're going to be covering items in order of introduction. Oh, by the way, you can play the intro now. To streamline things, we're only going to be covering the mainline entries since between, say, the arcade Mario Karts and Tour, there would be nearly 200 additional items to cover, so we're not. Let's start with the banana, Mario Kart's most overlooked item. Some might even say the worst item was it not for the fact that it was introduced alongside the coin and the feather. Even though it's not flashy, when you're in first place, this is exactly what you want to see. Just a solid defensive tool. I'm thinking B for banana. Green shell. In a lot of Mario Karts, this is basically the best thing you could roll in first. It's just as good as the banana when defending yourself, and if you do get passed up, it can be used offensively unlike a banana. Also in most Mario Karts, the green shell can be rolled in all the same positions as a banana. However, in most scenarios, a green shell is going to be the item you'd rather have. High B. The red shell was always good, but in recent entries, it's downright scary. I mean, it's always been a solid homing item, but in 8, it will straight up fly and hit players in the air. That's insane. A. Everyone's favorite run to the litter, the feather. It seems a lot of people hold the same perspective on this guy. It's not a great item, but it's also hard to hate. I mean, it is fun to use. It's not available on every course, but on the courses it is available. There's some decent shortcut options. It also lets you dodge items with good timing. Between its super iteration and its less useful 8 deluxe iteration, I think averaging out to a C is fair. Most people are going to think about it at 8 when talking about it nowadays, but for its effectiveness relative to Super Mario Kart specifically, it's not that bad. The single mushroom. Similar to a feather, its effectiveness really depends on the course. On tracks where you can take shortcuts of a well-timed mushroom, huge. But on the handful of tracks where boost pads are sprinkled everywhere, much less useful. In a lot of Mario Karts, such as Double Dash, DS, Wii, and recently 8, you can't even roll this in first. I'm thinking B, but below the green shell. The star's an S. Do I even need to defend this one? It makes you invincible, knocks out other players when driving into them, increases your top speed, and nullifies off-road penalties. On top of all of that, it's actually a lot more common than you'd think. Or at the very least, it's more common than what I thought. The probability is decently high given its value, and in 64, you can roll this as high as second place. Has anyone ever stolen anything good of the Boo? Ever? Beyond an item steal not being a guarantee, it's a surprisingly rare item. Although the item steal is seen as its main ability, I think making the player invulnerable is the better perk. In certain Mario Karts, it lets you ignore the off-road penalties, although the most recent game, 8, is not one of them. See, I'm one of the few people who actually likes the inclusion of coins in Mario Kart, but when I desperately need something to defend myself, and you hand me this?
No! 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 Just throw it all away, you know? No!
Until the introduction of the Chain Chomp or the Bullet Bill, a strong argument could be made that the Lightning was the undisputed best item you could roll when you desperately needed to catch up. It makes everyone spin out, shrinks them down, decreasing their speed, makes them easier to push around or even squash in the earlier games, and in the new entries, will remove everyone's items. I hate this thing, but a lot of my distaste for this one simply comes from the fact that, yeah, it really is that good. It completely shifts the power dynamic of the entire race in your favor, and very rarely am I actually in the position to roll one, so I get to see how good it is secondhand by losing all my shit at the worst possible time. I hate it, but like, it's gotta be S. On to the items added to 64, the triple mushroom. What's there to say? It's a mushroom but triple. In 64 specifically, you are actually more likely to roll a triple mushroom than a single one. Bizarre. In other games, it's less common, but unlike, say, the golden mushroom, there isn't a timer on the usage for these, so you can space them out as much as you like. A. Speaking of the golden mushroom, known in 64 as the super mushroom. I talked about my disposition towards the gold in my worst Mario Kart items video. It was definitely the spiciest take I had in that video. Although in 64, it's actually pretty solid since the maps are more open, and it's not some rare item you're only pulling in the back of the pack. In 64, you could roll these things as high as second place. But the second they added the Bullet Bill, the gold basically became obsolete. And that's pretty much my problem. On maps like Rainbow Road, a gold is the last thing you want to see while you're struggling in last because it's going to send you flying off the track unless you're using it very conservatively. Which at that point, you'd be better off of a triple mushroom, which is a third place item in every game and even a second place item in 64. The chronically only online response is skill issue, and yeah, that's kind of exactly why it's bad. If you're rolling this at all, you're most likely not very good. So the last thing someone with a quote-unquote skill issue needs is something that is only going to make them f**k up even more. In every single Mario Kart, with I think the only exception being Wii, in any placement you can roll a gold, you can also roll a bullet bill. And if you're struggling so hard that you're able to roll these things in the first place, the bullet is what you want. The only argument left would be that the bullet always tries to follow the main path, whereas you can take shortcuts with golds. But there's also plenty of cuts you can take of a bullet bill, so it's a null point. In fact, a mushroom couldn't even dream of some of the cuts you can take of Mr. Bill. I mean, look at some of these. That's nuts. See. Alright, I wanted to count the 64 variant of this one, the fake item block, separately. The gold mushroom is better in 64, but that's mostly due to the engine in the tracks, opposed to the item. Whereas the 64 variant of the fake item block is straight up just way better than every iteration that followed. Firstly, the 64 version is actually convincing. You can barely tell it isn't the real thing in this game. And secondly, unlike the other versions, 64's fake can actually be used offensively. In the later games, items pass right through the fake, but not this one. Plus, the knockout from it is on par with a bomb. Honestly, high A. It can be rolled in first and is way better than the banana. The banana bunch is another insane item. Not to be confused with the triple banana, because the bunch is a trail of 5 bananas you get to drop independently from each other. What else do I even say? That's a high A. Triple shells kick ass. Even the green ones. I mean, not only is that 3 items, but they revolve around you, creating an offensive shield. A. Triple greens are pretty solid, but then...
Allow us to introduce ourselves.
Holy cow, what an insanely good item. There's a few items that got worse over time, but this one only got better since the red shell itself has gotten better. No timer or anything, so you can effectively space these out and potentially knock over 3 different opponents. These are not that rare either. In some games, you can roll these as high as 2nd place. Seeing another player with a triple red is one of the most horrifying things ever. I mean, really. If the dude in front of you has a triple red, you're straight up just not passing them without getting hit. S. Another item I want to count separately is the blue shell. In 64, it traveled across the ground, making for a much better item since you had the potential to hit more than just a player in first. I shouldn't have to explain why that's more helpful if you're in the back of the pack. However, in Double Dash, DS, and Wii, it flew in the air, only hitting the person in first. Well, unless the other players were in the proximity of the explosion, but that's besides the point. They came back to their senses in 7, having the blue shell travel along the ground once more, and thankfully they carried over the 8. This is a ranking of that version of the blue shell. A tier for the blue shell in 64, 7, and 8. In fact, I might as well throw the flying one on here now. C for that one. On to the Double Dash items, starting with the fireballs. I like this one. This is not the same thing as the fire flower, since the fireball is more of a shotgun spread. Weird correlation maybe, but that's how I would describe it. It's unfortunately just a spin out opposed to a knockdown, but you're basically guaranteed to hit at least one person with this thing. B. The heart, Peach and Daisy special, is one of the best. This will not only protect you from 2 items, but even give you the item it protected you from. Honestly, I think this one gets overlooked too much, but a lot of that might be due to the fact that the probability of rolling this one is insanely low. It's too rare to be an S, but it's at least an A. The Yoshi egg is basically a red shell that drops goodies you can grab as you pass the player that you hit, sometimes even dropping a star if you're real lucky. A. The Chain Chomp, the cooler but probably slightly worse bullet bill. The big difference is that the Chain Chomp is more offensive, whereas the bullet bill is more utilitarian, aka it's faster and helps you get further up into the pack better. A cool thing about the Chain Chomp though, playing more on that offensive side, is that even after it stops dragging you along a track, it will continue traveling along the course, potentially hitting more opponents up ahead. S, but below the star, since this is a rare item you're only going to be seeing in the way back. The giant banana is a giant banana that is practically the length of the whole road on certain tracks, and when someone hits it, it splits into 3 more bananas. Also, you can roll it in first with extremely high probability. S. Bowser shell is basically a giant green shell that just runs over everything and won't break unless it bounces off a million walls. If you're on a track with no edges or tons of turns, its effectiveness is limited, so that's definitely a strike against it. But if you get a long stretch of a bunch of people, this thing wreaks havoc. A. The bomb was also something I talked about in my worst items list and was expecting some pushback, but it seemed most people agreed with my stance, which surprised me. The bomb is tons of fun to use, but how the throwing works varies from game to game, and it's never what you'd expect. You're also very limited on where and even how far you can throw this if you don't want to get blown up yourself. Your opponent has to be like the perfect distance, there can't be low ceilings or anything in the way, and you gotta dead-on snipe them to use this effectively, which again, isn't always possible depending on the conditions. It's a great defensive item surprisingly, but the only Mario Kart where you can roll this thing in first is 8 Deluxe. Like, specifically 8 Deluxe. You cannot roll them in first in Wii U. Low B, mostly just for how good it is in 8 Deluxe as a first place item. The modern fake item. Did I not rank this yet? Here's the newer one seen in every game until being completely removed in 7. It's painfully obvious it's fake, and items go right through it, meaning it can't be used defensively. So much worse than the one in 64 that I knew I had to rank them separately. C. On to DS. Bullet Bill is an easy S, right? Obviously it's an item you're only going to get in the back of the pack, but there's no better item for catching up than the bullet. I mean, you don't even have to play. It just drives for you. Not the very top of S because, again, it's not like you could roll this when you're towards the front, but still S. Blooper. I'm just gonna... Okay. Triple banana. Same thing as the banana bunch from 64, except with 3 bananas instead of 5. Still really good, if not the best defensive item in the games that it's in. But a little birdie once told me that 3 is still a smaller number than 5. A. Wheeze Mega Mushroom. When looking into the probability of rolling this and that, I was honestly surprised to see that while you can roll this in higher rankings than a star, its average probability is actually lower than a star. In fact, in positions where you can roll both a star or a mega, the probability of a mega is never higher than a star. And while the Mega Mushroom is cool, it is objectively worse than a star. Still crossing my fingers that if they ever add this back, it will behave as it does in Tour, so there isn't any overlap, although the version in Wii is a B. The Thundercloud is one of the most creative items they've ever added, but it's also one of the worst. A hot potato sort of deal where you pass it on to another racer, and the person of it over their cart when the timer runs out gets shrunken down. It being automatically activated the second you roll it means if you get this when you're nowhere near any of the other racers, you're kind of just f***ed. I definitely like the modding community's version of this item better, where it grows you at the end of the timer instead of shrinking you, still keeping that stealing mechanic intact, whilst not f***ing you over if you roll this while no one is around. Hats off to the modders, but I ain't congratulating the Wii's vanilla version. D. Pow Block. Another cool item on paper, but it's pretty useless if you're playing with people who actually know what they're doing, since a simple remote waggle will prevent you from slowing down. It still makes everyone lose their items, which is neat, but it gives them plenty of time to either use it, or find a jump to avoid the POW entirely. Low B. Actually, is this a C? I'll keep it low B for now. The Fire Flower. This is in 7 and 8, and the main difference is that in 7, if you throw too many at once, it will delete the oldest fireball you've thrown. So it's definitely better in 8, but it's not a great item in either. You basically gotta be on a straight to make the most out of this, because it's not like you can curve your shot. And unlike a shell, this only spins out an opponent opposed to knocking them over. Oh, also, it's on a timer, so you're stuck with it until it runs out. The flower is more rare than a red, but I'd much rather have a red in nearly every scenario. C. Another timer item is a Super Leaf, although you can just let it get hit by a shell without swiping if you want to use it like a single banana. And really, the timer is the only bad thing about the leaf in my opinion. Otherwise, it can deflect items back at the user, dodge bomb explosions, which is literally insane, keep you in the air longer, make you go faster underwater, and of course, its main ability is spinning the tail to knock out, not spin out, knock out everyone in the vicinity. That includes ridding of any item they may have been holding behind them. The leaf gets a bad rap, but as far as first place items go, I don't mind its inclusion. B. The Lucky 7 is an item you can't actually roll in 7th. Kind of bullshit, honestly. For how rare the item is, it really isn't that much better than a star. Like, obviously it is better than a star because it quite literally has a star in it, but given its rarity, this is kind of just a clusterfuck of an item. B. The Crazy 8 is a more rare version of the 7 except with a coin. B. Revolving Bananas. The game still calls this the triple banana, but I wanted to count it separately since it's objectively worse. First of all, even when you have all 3 bananas, you can actually still get hit by items. No joke. Secondly, since they are always revolving, you have to time placing them to block incoming items. That's in contrast to the original triple or the bunch, where you were usually safe just by simply having the item out. You can't even roll this in first place, which is probably the biggest slap to the face. C. Oh, by the way, I changed my mind. The boo is a B and a POW block is a C. Boomerang Flower. Does this thing have any fans? The Boomerang Flower is a limited range weapon you can use a total of 3 times. It's basically just a triple green if every shell could only be thrown a fixed distance, and also didn't create an offensive shield surrounding the player. It's kind of fun to use, but looking at it objectively, I would rank this at C. The Piranha Plant is another sort of middling item that got added in 8. Funnily enough, I still wouldn't want them to get rid of the Boomerang Flower or this, because I like the added variety they provide, but I can't say I'm exactly super stoked when I roll this. This will chomp at nearby players, and give you periodic speed boosts which can mess you up depending on the engine class you're playing, and of course where you are in the track itself. It's also not like a mushroom boost, so you can't exactly use this to do the same shortcuts you'd need a mushroom for. Honestly, my favorite thing about the Piranha Plant is that it eats a blooper. Absolutely based. Beyond that, middle of C. Our final item, the Super Horn. Is it safe to say that this is everyone's favorite item they added to Mario Kart 8? The Boomerang and the Piranha Plant are pretty hit and miss with people, but I don't think I've met someone who didn't like the horn. And why not? I mean, it destroys the blue shell after all. How could you not love that? It attacks all players in a radius around you, gives you iframes protecting you from explosions. This is debatably the best item you can roll in first first place in Mario Kart 8. I don't know if I could put it over stuff like the Star or the Bullet Bill, but it's at least a low S. And that's the list. Don't bother debating any of these rankings. These are the final opinions anyone should have. I even consulted Miyamoto himself, and he approved of every last ranking here. In fact, I actually made Mario Kart, and I'm currently hard at work on Mario Kart 9, so this is going to be the last new video I do that isn't some sort of compilation until I finish that game. Well, better get back to work. See ya. Hey, thanks for watching. I'd like to give a huge thanks to patrons such as your boy Busby, Pig the Pork, Ralph W. Kelly, Alizard, Niji, Evan Halbert, Some Crazy Idiot, Ian, David Marchese, Kenzo Tien, Drew Kellenberger, David Pacheco, Pretoria Mars, and Amanda Guth. Have a great rest of your evening, and until next time, have a good one.